So this whole system started in 1913, and around 29 to 33 was the first debt crisis. Now you know that 1929 we had the stock market crash, but that really wasn't the exact beginning of this. It was the start, okay? I know I just said opposite. It was sort of the beginning, but not exact, okay? But it always is a few years time span when they start the bankruptcy point, okay? But most people didn't understand it. But what really occurred in 33 is we went off the gold standard. And when we went off the gold standard, now let me explain how that actually worked, and we talked about this originally. What they did is took the gold away from the people. So they had no control over the gold. Now, sorry, I'll pull up a different pen here. From 33 to 71 to around 74, gold had moved from in 33 to 34, it went up from 20 bucks up to $33 a share, or an ounce, excuse me. And it stayed relatively equal up around till 71. Now here's one of the things that happened. So when we look at this next slide here, we first see the stock market crash. So this guy sitting there, $100 will buy this car, must have the cash, lost all of it in the stock market. And it's the panic, okay? But again, it was a signal, okay? It was how they were stealing from you here in 29. And our next slide here, you're seeing a Texaco thing. So you see the Texaco with all the people driving up there, and they were stuck. So this part is into the next phase of how they take the money from us. So this is really where most people will say, well, this is where we went off the gold standard. And what that meant is that the American dollar was called the petrodollar. So it was based upon the oil that was transforming throughout the world, or moving throughout the world, just like a crypto. Okay? A crypto is moving money throughout the world. So what Nixon was told to do, and I mean, there's some crazy things about Nixon. I'll give it to you in a second. But Nixon was told to do is he had to cut off the gold standard, because African, like South Africa or Egypt was turning in their dollars for gold. Well, guess what? We were coming to a bankruptcy point. And when we come to that bankruptcy point, gold went up to around 70 bucks. And by 1990, about 95, we were up at $368 per ounce. I mean, it just went off the charts with that. But let me give you a little Nixon point. Did you know that Joseph P. Kennedy, JFK's father, JFK Sr.'s father, was deep into the cabal. He actually was close with Poppy Bush's dad, who's, pre-World War II era. Okay, Poppy Bush, Bush Sr. Fought in World War II. Okay, and Poppy Bush is one of the sickos with this. And Nixon actually fought and went to World War II. So did JFK. So he was a very young officer. But guess who brought him in? It's Joseph P. Kennedy. He was an actor, and he was brought in on the Republican side to go against JFK. Do you see how they always mess with elections? They've been doing it for generations. It just wasn't 2020. It's 1960. It's a perfect example, 60 years ago. And then they had to delete him when he wouldn't do exactly their bidding. And they frankly were probably over with him. They didn't need him anymore. So that's the next part of this point. And we move out from 71 to the next bankruptcy point, which is 99. So we're going to talk a little bit about 99 to 2001. So let me kind of erase this up here. because we're kind of messing up with this screen. Okay, so 99 to around 2001, we have the next bankruptcy crisis point. One of the things that happened is Russell J. Gould looked at the system, and he found that we were in a bankruptcy right away here. And so he went in and actually founded the quantum language that we are talking about with the quantum financial system. So in the quantum language, he started understanding that when they capitalize your name, okay, when you see Scott capitalized, that's how they're showing you as a dead vessel. And they do a whole bunch of things with birth certificates and other kind of things. I don't want to get off into that kind of track. So what they're using you as a dead vessel so that they could trade you in the stock market. Well, Russell J. Gould actually understood this. So he became Postmaster General of the Philadelphia Bank in 1999. And he took over the flag and all the whole process with this. This is the beginning because he saw a bankruptcy sitting out there. Oh, it pissed off Bill Clinton. Not like you cannot believe. Now, in and around 9 of 2000, so Clinton's at the end of his 8-year term, he was told and held at gunpoint by the White Hat military that we needed to move into a gold-backed currency. So here's what they did. They set up a system, and that's why you have to understand Bush and Gore were fighting each other. When you saw those little hanging chads kind of stuff, it was just another, that was a systemic approach to how they were going to manipulate the future elections. So now we see a systemic approach in this process. So now we have Bush in line in here. So one of the things that happens is they put the gold and the computer system in World Trade Center 1 and 2. So they have the gold and the computer system set us up into that. World Trade Center 7 is an even more fascinating. So you'll see on the screen here, but let me tell you about World Trade Center 7, then we'll go backward over some of the things that you look at. Now it's hard to see some of the stuff on the screen, but I'll give you an idea. In World Trade Center 7 was all the documentation about the CIA and JFK. They really needed to get that documentation. This is the evidence against them. So we have the gold and the computer system, and we have the evidence over here. Now, what you don't really understand is Larry Silverstein, only 2 months, 3 months maybe before 9/11, goes off and revalues the building at, I think it was like $3 billion. And he put an extra rider against terrorism. Now, if you go and watch videos, it's the BBC, and over the woman's left shoulder, World Trade Center 7 is still standing, and she's talking about they say, well, what's happening? Well, World Trade Center 7 is down. It hadn't been down yet. Messing with their narrative. See, the reality messes with your narrative. And so here's what happened. World Trade Center 7, he actually, and they talked on PBS, they talked to Larry Silverstein. He said it had to be pulled. Now, what do you say by pulled? The Seattle Kingdom, years and years before, just came down as this gorgeous, whoosh, just comes down like this. World Trade Center 7 comes down in 7 seconds. 9/11 truthers go through this thing with structural engineers and architects and people who know better. There's been no fire in the history of the world that can take down a building. And yet both buildings come down and all the little materials out there. Here's the thing, if you look over the left side of the screen over here, magical proof appearing of passports. Now, if the fire is so big it's going to take out the buildings, how come passports magically show up around you? There's no way that they can do that. And if you look down on the left side of the screen too again, and it says magically diagonally cut support beams. Like, guess what? It would come down in a whole structure point. They were actually cut. So there was a very powerful set of things that they did. They have a thermite that they had set up to take out the building. And secondly, there was some real great evidence about a DEW, a directed energy weapon that might have come down, because there were cars that were burning in some places and other cars that were perfectly placed just had ash on them. These criminals are the big issue. Do you know that Rumsfeld in the Pentagon takes out one day earlier, has $2.3 trillion that they can't find in the kitty. They're looking around, they can't find it. And no one ever asks them to explain it. It's how they steal this whole system. It's been trying to come on for a very long time frame. The reality that you have to see is 2001, guess what we're going to come up to? When we move over here, we have to have another bankruptcy period of time, and we call it 2020. Now, it's taking all the way a few years. By the way, remember we said this, it takes a couple years to get this thing done when they finalize it. That's why we either have the system of the Great Reset, which is already dead. I know you don't believe that right now if you're listening to this, or you have NESARA. There's only one of two possibilities out there. There's no in between of this. It's known about. The death cycles come every 20, 30 years. And it's there. It's in the ethosphere in essence. Don't believe it any other way.